Hi everyone, Jason here at the Whittier Public Library with our latest steam-powered science take-home science kit. Today we are going to make a diving penguin, and we're going to learn a little bit about density, buoyancy, and penguins. So let's go ahead and get started. So if you picked up one of our kits at the library, you should already have everything you need. If not, you're going to need a bottle of water. This is optional. You can have a little diving penguin, which I've created and laminated to keep from getting wet. A couple of adhesive strips, again, only if you're using your penguin. That's an optional part of the experiment. And then you'll need a couple of ketchup packets or other condiment packets. You'll have to use the right one. You might have to try a few different kinds of condiment packets to find just the right one. These Heinz ketchup ones seem to work very well. So let's go ahead and get started putting our experiment together. Okay, so let's assemble our diving penguin. This is going to be a pretty simple one to put together. You will need a little bit of extra water, and I would recommend doing this someplace, like for example, maybe near a sink, where it doesn't matter if you spill a little bit, because chances are you will spill a little bit of water. If you're doing this with your own water bottle, I just want to mention, make sure to get one with fairly sturdy, rigid sides. They're really cheap ones, and also a pretty sturdy cap. They're really cheap ones that you can buy in bulk. Often don't work very well. They do need those rigid sides that have a little bit more thickness to them, and they do need a cap that will stay on well because you're going to give this a good hard squeeze. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up my water here. Take the cap off. And I'm going to prepare my penguin. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my little... And remember, using the penguin is totally optional. It's just to give it a little bit more of a holiday winter feel. So you're going to take these. You're going to stick that on the back of the penguin like that. And then you're going to peel it off carefully. And then you're going to take another one of these little adhesive dots. Again, you're going to stick it on the back of the penguin. Peel it off carefully. They should be stuck on the back. We'll get rid of the trash. Now you're going to get your ketchup packet and you're going to flatten it out nicely like that. You take this, you're going to stick it right on there. Stick it on, get it on there really well. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to want to get it into your water bottle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend it, give it a little bit of a curve like that. And then I'm just going to use that to slip it right in, and it should float. Okay, you see it's floating. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to top this off with my other water. You have to make sure that your water bottle is completely filled all the way to the top with no air bubble. So you want it completely filled. So you're going to put a little bit of extra water in, all the way till it's up to the very, very top. And then you're going to take your cap, you're going to put this cap on really, really tight. You're going to put it on as tight as you possibly can. And you might want to get an adult to help you with that, to get it on real tight, because you're going to need to squeeze this bottle, and if you squeeze it and the cap's not on tight, water's just going to squirt all over the place, and you can make a mess. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and switch over to our one of these I already have prepared and ready to go. And I'm going to show you what will happen. Okay, now I have my diving penguin that's all ready to go, as you can see here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the bottle and I'm going to give it a really hard squeeze. And watch what happens with the penguin. You see it dives to the bottom. Let go, it's going to come right back to the surface. Squeeze hard, the penguin dives. Let go, goes back to the surface. If you can't quite squeeze hard enough, ask for a parent or an adult to help you out, because it does need a pretty hard squeeze. Okay, let's talk next about what's happening here. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about why our penguin dives and surfaces. It has to do with density and it has to do with buoyancy. So density is how much stuff is packed into how much space. So density depends both on weight or mass, how much something weighs, and it depends on volume, which is how much space it takes up. To give you an example of density, if you were to take a penny and a basketball you were to throw them both into some water, what would happen? The penny would sink and the basketball would float, right? Well, the basketball weighs a lot more than the penny. It has a lot more mass. However, the penny is much smaller and the basketball is much bigger. So the basketball has a much bigger volume. Because it has a much bigger volume, it also has lower density than the penny, which means it's going to float while the penny sinks. Now let's talk a little bit about buoyancy, and then we'll get into specifically what's happening with our penguin ketchup packet. So buoyancy is a force in water or other fluids that pushes upwards against gravity and makes things float. So in a fluid or in water, the pressure will be higher the lower you go into the water because there's more water pushing down on top, which creates more pressure. If you ever tried to go swimming and tried to swim really deep, you may have noticed you can feel more pressure in your ears. That's the water pressure that's higher as you go lower in the water. Because the water pressure is higher lower down, it's going to push a little bit harder on whatever object is in the water. The water pressure at the top is lower, so it won't push as hard. So when you're pushing more from the bottom and less from the top, it's going to push upward, and it's going to make that thing tend to float. If things are too high in density, they will sink anyway. But if they're less dense than the water, they have lower density than the water, that water pressure will push them up enough that they will float. So what specifically is happening with our penguin diver here? Well, what's happening is the ketchup packet has a lot of ketchup in it. It also has an air bubble with a little bit of air. When we squeeze the sides of the water, we increase the water pressure in the bottle. That squeezes that ketchup packet. That compresses the air inside a little bit. So the ketchup packet gets a little bit smaller. It loses a little bit of volume. But the weight stays the same. Therefore, that means the density of the ketchup packet increases. It goes up a little bit, right? So now it's a little bit more dense. Before it was floating, it's staying on the top just barely. But when you increase that density, now it is dense enough that it will be able to sink. Sinks to the bottom. When you take the pressure off, that air bubble inside the ketchup packet expands again. The volume goes back up. Now the density is lower, which means it comes back to the surface. And that's why your penguin dives and surfaces. Now we're going to talk a little bit about penguins. Penguins, as I'm sure you know, are birds, but unlike most birds, they can't fly. But what they can do is they can swim and dive very, very well. They're remarkable swimmers and divers. To give you a couple of facts about penguins, the emperor penguin, which is the world's largest penguin, is also the best diver of all penguins. These penguins generally dive between 300 to about 800 feet below the water, which is really, really deep, looking for food. But some scientists that studied them once found one that went down about 1,800 feet. To give you an idea of how deep that is deeper than the height of the tallest building in the United States of America. These are amazing divers. And swimming, the fastest swimming penguin is called a Gentoo penguin. And the Gentoo penguin, despite only being about as big as a toddler, a human toddler, can swim about 4 times as fast as the fastest human Olympic swimmers. So penguins are some pretty amazing swimmers and divers. Thanks for joining us today. That's the end of our experiment. If you'd like to learn more about any of these topics, please stop by the Whittier Public Library, talk to our friendly librarians, and we will help you find some books about them. To give you an example, we have a few examples right over here. So feel free to come in and ask for any of the books you see here or any others. We'll see you at the library soon, and thanks for joining us today.